All right, so today I'm going to show you how to do standard form. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify the X and Y intercept, and then we are going to sketch a graph for those equations. All right, so let's start with this equation here. This is in standard form because the leading coefficient A is a positive integer. B is an integer, and C is also an integer. So this is in standard form. So I showed you guys last week a few minutes, we went over the pirate method. Okay, that's the shortcut. So I'm going to show you the reason we're allowed to do that. So the x-intercept is when y equals 0. That means if y is 0, then we are on our x-axis when we graph. We're going to plug y, 0 in for this. So we're going to write it 2x plus 5 times 0 equals 15. And essentially when I multiply by 0, what am I doing? Well, I'm covering it, right? 5 times 0 is 0, and that's nothing. So you end up with 2x equals 15. We divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals
8.5?
7.5.
7.5, sorry.
Okay, so this is my x-intercept. What are the coordinates for my x-intercept?
7.50.
Right, y is 0, 7.5 is x. Okay? The shortcut to that would be just covering up this and doing the division, and you get 7.5. All right, so now I have my x-intercept. Now I got to do the same thing for my y-intercept. The y-intercept is when x equals 0. So that means plug 0 into the equation and solve for y. So this becomes 2 times 0 plus 5y equals 15. And we get 5y equals 15. Divide by 5. Y equals 3. So what is my coordinate?
0, 3.
Okay, so now I have my y-intercept and my x-intercept. So we have identified the y and x-intercept. That's the first goal for today. Second goal is to graph them. So I could graph it neatly on a coordinate plane, but I want to show you how to sketch a graph. Okay? To sketch a graph, you're going to draw an xy coordinate plane. And then you're going to plot just those 2 points. 7.50 is over this way. And 0.3 is up here, but not as high. And then you draw your line through it. And this is the equation 2x plus 5y equals 15. Okay, so in this process, I identified the x-intercept, the y-intercept, then I graphed them, and I'm done. All right? Questions? Now the shortcut, which we already went over, is how do I find my x and y-intercept very quickly? Well, you cover the y. What's my x-intercept? 7.5. That's over here. What's my y-intercept?
3.
It's right here. It's the same process, and then you draw your line. Okay? So on the PSAT or some test where you're short on time, covering them is a fast way to get through the problem. This is the mathematically accurate way to do that. Okay? All right. Let's look at example 2. So now we're going to talk about, so this is what type of slope? Negative slope, right? Positive slope would be the other way. Well, there's 4 types of lines. There's a positive slope line, there's a negative slope line, and then there's 2 other lines. What are they? Zero slope and
Negative 0.
No slope.
No.
undefined slope. Okay, so we're going to look at those. So let's look at y equals 3. Okay, so how is this interpreted in standard form? Well, what's missing?
X.
X. So if X is missing, what's not going to happen?
You can do stand.
We can put it in standard form. So when the x-intercept is when y is 0. Is y 0?
No.
The y-intercept is when x is 0. So there's no x, right? So this basically means there's no x-intercept. If there's no x-intercept, what does that mean our line is going to look like?
Straight.
Straight line going which way?
Horizontal.
Horizontal. If it never crosses the x-axis, that means it has to be parallel with the x-axis, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what that means. So what does this look like in standard form? Well, what's missing? The x. So I can't say x plus y equals 3, right? That's not accurate. Those aren't the same thing, right? But can I say this? Yeah. So 0x plus y equals 3 is the same thing as y equals 3, but this one is in standard form. So how can I take this and put it in standard form? Well, I just add a 0x. Okay, so what is my y-intercept?
3.
What is my x-intercept?
Nothing.
0.
0. Well, not really.
There's no.
Can you divide by 0?
Yeah.
No.
No, you're not allowed to. Right? In math, you're not allowed to divide by 0. Yeah, so that's called undefined, which means it doesn't exist, which means there is no x-intercept. So if we have a y-intercept of 3 and no x-intercept, what does my graph look like? A y-intercept of 3 and no x-intercept, what does it look like?
Straight line.
A horizontal line going through this point. That's that graph. Yes?
So if it's 0, then it would be wait, is this considered an undefined slope?
No, this slope is 0.
So
The x-intercept is undefined, which means it doesn't exist.
So when putting this into slope intercept form, it'll just be.
So right now we're just looking at standard form.
Okay.
So this is the equation in standard form, and this is the graph of that equation. And any equation where you have y equals something is a horizontal line going through that point on the y-axis. Alright, so let's look at x equals -1. So what is this missing?
Y-intercept.
It's missing the y, so there's no y-intercept, right? So if there's no y-intercept, what kind of line is it?
It's a vertical line parallel from
Vertical, parallel to the y-axis. But let's put this in standard form. So what is this equation in standard form?
X plus 0y.
X
equals
plus
negative.
0, y equals -1.
What's a?
A is -1.
1.
1. There's no a, right? So what's a?
1.
1. Okay. What's b?
0.
C is -1, right? So this is in standard form, yeah? Okay. How do I graph this? What is my x-intercept?
1.
What's my y-intercept?
0.
Undefined. Right?
Yes.
Means it doesn't exist. So that means there is no y-intercept. I'm sorry, my x-intercept should be on the x-axis, not the y-axis. Should be there. My x-intercept is -1. My y-intercept doesn't exist, so it's a parallel line to the y-axis. So anytime you have, so what's my slope for this?
0.
Undefined.
Slope is undefined. You're not, so this is called an undefined slope. Vertical lines have undefined slope. Think about like what's the slope of a wall? That wall, the wall to this room, what's the slope of the wall?
It just goes
There is no slope. It's like running into a brick wall, right? What's the slope of the floor?
0.
0. There's no slope. It's flat. But the slope of the wall is not 0. It's undefined. Okay. So this is an undefined slope. This is a 0 slope. But anyways, we don't really care about the slopes. We're looking at this equation here. So from here, can you write this and then graph this? That's what we need to do. Okay? All right, so let's look at one that's a little more complicated. Was it 4x
Negative 4.
equals 14? All right, so what's missing?
Y.
Y, so that means there's no
Y.
y-intercept, which means that it is a vertical undefined sloped line, right? Okay. So what is my x-intercept? Well, to do that, I'm going to have to solve it, right? Divide by -4, and I get x equals -3.5.
Yeah.
I was not being very accurate here. I should list this ordered pair. If I'm sketching, I need to list it. So this is -1, 0. So where do I graph -3.5? Which axis?
The
X.
X-axis, so -3.5. And then 0. Like that. So what did I not put here? I forgot the equation, right? So what is my equation?
-4x equals 4. What? Oh.
Oh, negative 4
Negative 4x plus 0y equals 14.
Is that in standard form?
You. Oh no, because the
A
a
is
cannot
negative.
be negative.
Yep. All right, so that's not a problem. How do I change -4 to +4? So divide by -1 or multiply by -1. So I'm just going to multiply everything by -1. This becomes +4x. Well, 0 is neither positive or negative, so it just stays as 0y. And this becomes -14. That's my equation. I multiplied everything by -1. Or you can just change everything's sign. If you change one sign, you got to change all the signs. So, that was the equation it gave me at first. I put it in standard form and then I graphed it. Now, do I need to put it in standard form to graph it?
No.
But we're using standard form, so I wanted to show you. Okay, questions? How's this stuff showing up? You guys able to see this video?
Yeah, everything's on the screen.
Is it showing up okay? Good. All right, example 3. All right, so going back to our goals, we identified the x and the y intercepts. We graphed in standard form, and we identified and graphed horizontal and vertical lines. So we're done with the first 3. Now we're going to write equations in standard form. So example 3 is an equation y equals 3x plus 8. We want to write this in standard form. First, what form is this in?
Point a slope form.
Slope intercept form. Okay. So if I want to move this to standard form, what's on the left side of an equation in standard form?
X.
The x
X and Y.
and the y. What's on the right side? The c, or the integer, or the constant. We call it a constant. If it doesn't have a variable, it's called a constant. All right, so what needs to move?
3x.
The 3x. How do I move 3x algebraically? Subtract 3x from both sides. And I get -3x plus y equals 8. We're pretty close to standard form. What's the only thing that needs to change?
Wait.
Oh, the negative.
The negative. So
Negative one.
I can multiply or divide by -1. I'm just going to go ahead and multiply here. I'm going to multiply both sides by -1. When I do that, all the signs change. This changes to a positive 3x. This changes to a minus y or minus 1y. And this changes to -8. Now we're in standard form. Now what would happen if this was a negative 3x? What would I have done? I would have added 3x both sides, and then I would add 3x plus y equals 8. I don't need to change that, it's good to go. Everything's lined up nicely. What is A?
1.
3. What's B?
Oh, sorry. 1. Negative 1.
-1. What's C?
Negative 8.
Okay, -8. These are allowed to be negative, this one's got to be positive, okay? This is -1. You guys know there's an invisible 1 there?
Yes.
Okay. Alright, let's do the next one. What's the next one in? What form?
Point slope form.
Point slope. Can you read it to me, Elizabeth?
Y minus 2 equals 1/2 times x plus 6.
Thank you. Okay, we're in point slope form, we want to get to standard form. There's a couple ways we can approach this. We can start by distributing the 1/2 to the x and the 6, or we could start by multiplying both sides by 2. Why would I multiply both sides by 2? Sasha?
There's a half, like, your,
The slope is a half.
the slope is a half and you're trying to cancel it out. And so you'd multiply 2 on side with the half and 2 on this.
Yeah, what's 2 times a half?
1.
1, so the fraction goes away, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one option. I doubt you guys are going to do that or remember to do that, so I'm going to show you the hard way. Let's distribute the 1/2. This becomes 1/2 x plus 3 equals y minus 2. Okay. Now I've got to move my 1/2 x this way and my 2 this way. Constants this way, variables this way. All right. So what should I do? I could add 2 to both sides, or I could subtract a half from both sides. I'll start by adding the 2. What form am I in?
You're in slope intercept form.
And I was in point slope form, right?
Yeah, you were.
Okay, this is just coincidence. It's not always going to go to slope intercept form first, but in this case it did. Okay, now I'm going to subtract half from both sides. Okay, almost there. What's the problem?
The
Madeline, what's the problem? Okay, so why is this not in standard form? It's a negative. Why else? What's the other problem? So the negative's a problem. What is the other problem? Eli? It's a fraction. What do I need it to be?
integer.
An integer. Yeah. So I got to change the negative's got to be positive, and I got to change this fraction to integer. So what can I multiply to get this to be an integer? Hold on. -2. So I can multiply by 2, right? If I multiply by 2, what's 2 times a half?
-1.
-1, but then that doesn't get rid of my negative, so what do I have to multiply by?
-2.
-2. What's -2 times -1/2?
1.
1, which is fine. So this will be 1x, or just x, plus, or I'm sorry, minus 2y. Got to distribute it to both. Equals
-10.
-10. Now I'm in standard form.
Wait.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Couldn't you have changed the negative 1/2 to negative 0.5?
Yep, it's still not a,
Oh, sorry, it's true.
still not an integer. Yeah, now what other number could I have multiplied 1/2 by to get an integer?
4,
What's 1/2 times 4?
2,
2. So then I would have had 2x minus
negative
4y equals negative 20. Isn't that in standard form?
2. Yes,
Yeah, but
just this.
it is. You could have done that and it would have been correct. But that equation simplifies to this equation. Okay. Also, this minus 2y, you can also have it as x plus negative 2y equals negative 10. But I just leave the minus as a minus. Okay, questions? Okay, and here's the last thing that I'm going to show you today. By the way, you guys are doing great. We are flying through standard form. We need to look at what happens if we're not given the equation and we're not given the graph. Instead, what if we're just given 2 points?
I know.
Okay, what do we do?
I have an idea.
Sure.
We could put it into point slope form and then change it to standard form.
We could. Say that again, but louder.
We could put it into point slope form and then change it to standard form.
Yeah, so we know how to put 2 points into point slope, right? We can also put 2 points into
Slope
slope intercept, and we now know how to change those two into standard form. So that's an option. There's a faster way. I'm going to show you the faster way. But yes, Elizabeth, if you can't remember this faster way, please put it in point slope, put it in standard, and then convert it into standard form. Okay? Or put it in point slope or slope intercept, convert it to standard. All right. What is this point here?
0.
It's my y-intercept. What is this point here? My x-intercept. So don't I have my 2 intercepts?
Yes.
Okay. Here's how you do it. You put the x-intercept in front of the y. You put the y-intercept in front of the x. And the x-intercept in front of the y. And then you multiply the 2 and you get c. Standard form.
Wow.
So look, this is my x, this is my y-intercept. And this goes in front of the x. This is my x-intercept. This went in front of the y. And then c is just negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Now how do we know this works? Well, let's check. What is my y-intercept? Negative 2. And what is my x-intercept? 7. Works, right? Let me show you again. My x-intercept is when y is y is 0. So what's my x-intercept? 7. My y-intercept is when x equals 0. So what is my y-intercept? Negative 2. Yeah, Jalen. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Oh yes, thank you. So we're not ready to go. Good job. Thank you for pointing that out, Jalen. All right. Was that what you guys had your hands up for? Yeah. Is this in standard form?
No.
So I just have to change it real quick. So this becomes 2x minus 7y equals. How did I get from here to here? I just multiply by negative 1, which is essentially changing all the symbols. Yes?
How is it 2x if the y-intercept is negative 2?
How did I get
Change
negative
it.
2x
Yeah.
if the y-intercept is negative 2? Because remember, the y-intercept is when x equals 0, and x-intercept is when y equals 0, so they're kind of backwards, right?
Yeah.
Switch them?
I know it's confusing, alright? Just remember this. The x-intercept number goes in front of the y, and the y-intercept goes in front of the x. If I had those the other way, it wouldn't work.
So you just switch it?
Yeah, you just switch. Okay.
And then you multiply it to
Now, is this the case? See how this is 2 times -7 gives me 14?
Yeah.
That's not what I had up here, right? -2 times 7 is -14, right?
Yeah.
This is true. This one, it didn't work, right?
Yeah.
So not all standard form can you multiply these two things and get the C,
Okie dokie.
So then,
okay?
But only when you have two points you can
If
multiply.
you have the x and the y-intercept, you can write it quickly in the standard form the way I just showed you,
Okay.
okay?
Okie dokie.
So what if I had these 2 points? 8, 0, and 0, 6. What would be my equation? Who thinks they know?
Me. Me.
Give them 1 second, there's one. Let's think about it. What would be my equation? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
6x plus 8y equals 48. I think.
6x plus 8y equals 48. Is that what you said?
Yes.
What is this? It's my x-intercept, right?
Yeah.
My x-intercept goes next to the
Y.
y. This is my y-intercept. And it goes next to the x. And then 8 times 6 is 48. Now let's make sure this makes